remember the original vision for Riding Shotgun TV was, how do you get to be such a badass? And today, oh, Teresa, I'm so excited. We have two incredible badass humans.
They're some of my favorite human beings.
Dude. Chills. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, we've interviewed such game changers, and really these two have, made history by their dedication to empowering others, And so both of these are members, they're actually co-founders of the Jessi Combs Foundation, who we've talked about. So if you don't know about her, you're going to hear a little bit about her today, a little bit more, but these two are badasses themselves. First, we have Dana Wilke. She's worked with a world-renowned company, Harley-Davidson, for over 10 years and is now running her own business, DJW Global. And then we have Graham Suorsa, an award-winning director-producer, who seriously, Jessi chooses everyone. And, she chose Graham, to tell her story. And so he is co-editor and producer of The Fastest Woman on Earth.
Welcome, you guys. First of all, I was telling Teresa, I have chills. I'm so grateful and so excited that the two of you are here. And there's so much swirling around in this in this cyberspace right now. She's here. Just so you know.
That energy. It's that energy.
No, thank you both so much for having us on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This is amazing. Just seeing you guys and hearing your voices. I've been so excited for this. Feels like just a little campfire chat.
I think I'm going to get this little party started here. And Dana, let's start with some questions that I have for you. So you're Dana Wilke, and you are the co-founder of the Jessi Combs Foundation. And you grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right?
Good.
And this is a full question, lots of sentences here. How did you get involved in motorsports, really, and riding? What ultimately drew you to this world, and who or what was your greatest influence?
Oh my gosh, Jane, there's so many questions there.
They all fit.
They do all fit. So co-founder, yes, of the Jessi Combs Foundation, one of the handful of friends and family that gathered together, to make sure that, in addition to the world, that Jessi's mission continues. And that's just something I am in service to that mission. And it's, the most exciting mission I've ever had in my life, to be honest. How did I get into motorsports? I grew up in the Midwest, riding motorcycles on and off road with my family. Motorsports and motorcycling was a family sport for us. And I know that, not everybody gets that opportunity when they're young. And so I think I really respect men and women, I guess, who enter the sport later in life, because it takes the courage that it takes to do some of those things. And I did grow up with it. That's what got me into motorcycling and, crashing on dirt bikes and stuff like that, trail riding, things like that. My mom rode a motorcycle. I thought that was normal. And my dad and I, Teresa, like you, when you grow up in certain, male-dominated industries, you don't realize it's male-dominated until you kind of get into that world and start hitting barriers or whatever, where you may not have felt that growing up, which I realize that is not the case normally. Yeah. Moving to California was like, I've been California dreaming since I was younger, and watching all of the, in the Midwest, you don't see some of the things only through videos and things like that you guys grew up with, Teresa and Jane, like Crusty Demons of Dirt and all these, these crazy, motocross films. It's like motocross films and skate videos and those types of things that you get at the motocross shop or the skate shop, like that was our input in view into that world that you guys were living, because this was before social media. And so my brother and I are watching these, crazy motorcycling video on any Sunday. Was our like, that movie is my favorite of all time. And my dad brought that home on a VHS tape, and we watched it till the wheels fell off the VHS, I think. But that really set my heart on fire for California, I think, and wanting to get out there. So I started working for Harley Davidson, and right after college, and the company actually moved me to California to take a field rep position. So I was responsible for calling on every dealer west of the Rockies, every Harley Davidson dealer, and reporting into the factory. So that's how I got to California, but I actually manifested it first because that was my dream, and to ride a motorcycle where so many of the things, in culture and customization and fashion and things start on that coast. And I knew that. And so getting out there was like where you guys get to ride all year round.
Yeah.
And not have to winterize your motorcycle. What a dream.
That is
right. So anyway, just that was my journey west, just like pioneers back in the Oregon Trail days, right? For some of the same reasons. And I never wanted to go back. I mean, I go back for my family from time to time. We still have a little cabin in northern Wisconsin where we grew up. That's home. But I love it in the West, and I get to hang out with you girls and ride with you girls and go off-roading and all the things.
Yes, of course we all manifest it, right? If that's something you want to do, you make it happen. And I love that. I love that you went out and did that. Graham, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your story too, as well as kind of how you were raised, or where as well. And how motorsports kind of played a part in your film career. And I want you to touch on Crusty Demons of the Dirt because
Sure. Well, I'll use Crusty Demons as our halfway point.
It really is.
Yeah.
I never thought, you guys pause. I never thought that would be a topic that I would be referencing in my adult life. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
It's perfect.
So I grew up on the East Coast in Massachusetts and Maine, and had a pretty heavy outdoorsy life, and one where we would just go get lost in the woods or down by the river for felt like days, but all day and find adventure. And so when we got our license, it started on bikes as kids, but then as soon as we got our license, motorsports for me was a car with a full tank of gas and some time and some friends, right? Or driving to my grandparents' house in the middle of winter in my first car was a 84 Ford wagon. The thing was just a mess, but drifting through the snow to my grandparents' house to shovel them out. And it was like, I would go out at the times where there was nobody on the road and just do car control, just full wheel lock through intersections and drifting. And so I really got car control based on the seasons, the joy of driving, never really motorsports proper. And I worked at a dealership through high school, detailing cars, driving, delivering, the whole thing, and then slowly worked on them a little bit, but just more of like a mentorship kind of thing for the guys at the shop. And then I went to film school because I had to kind of decide what I wanted to do with life. And I loved travel and music and art and culture and acting and photography and all that, and writing. And that's all filmmaking. It's all in aggregate. All those pieces make up a film or a TV show, right? So it was like, cool. If I go to school for film and television, I'll get to touch each of those disciplines. So I went to Fitchburg State University in Central Mass. And when I got out of school, I moved to New York to do my internship. I knew I needed to get out of Massachusetts. I was in New York for 2 years, worked on some really cool projects there. but I knew that I wanted more outdoor life and adventure. And I had a friend who had moved to California, and I wanted more adventure than grind. And so glad I did New York, cut my teeth there, but moved to LA in 2004. So I moved to New York just after 9/11. So really strange time, which was kind of formative in a lot of ways, but moved to LA in 2004. And one of my early jobs was Edmunds.com as a video producer. And I went into the job interview there. At this point, I would consider myself a videographer, editor, producer type, like low level. And in the interview, the guy said, "Have you ever shot a car screaming through a canyon at 60 miles an hour?" And I said, "No, I haven't, but I've shot a cheetah on safari, in Africa running 60 miles an hour." And he's like, "All right, I guess sounds good. And you got the job, right?" And so I go and we're filming every production vehicle day after day, new car, turn and burn, anything from a Hyundai Sonata to a Lamborghini, Ferrari, the whole range. And day 2, I realize I'm going to get ejected from this car. I was just hanging out the back of a convertible, and that's going to be it. And so I started designing camera rigs so that I could be belted in and have, like, I call it a shepherd's hook, a big thing that I can pan and tilt the camera around, and we can rip through canyons, and I can be in a seatbelt, and the cameras can all track the cars and all that. From Edmunds, I became creative director of Octane TV, which was like a multi-platform network where it was online, mobile, which one of the first mobile networks, and VOD, Time Warner Cable. As part of that job, we were recutting Crusty Demons of the Dirt content recutting it into new content, that and 50 Nuts as well. I don't know if you guys have seen 50 Nuts.
No.
It's guys
I'll have
on,
to watch it now.
yeah, check out
I'm not going to
50
Google
Nuts.
that. I'm not going to Google that.
Because these guys will like rip into a convenience store on little 50s and tear it up and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So we were recutting content. We were doing at that point, drifting was really big. It was like 2006. So a lot of early like Formula D stuff, drivers. And interestingly, looking back, a driver that I worked quite a bit with was Farina May, who's the only female drifter at the time. And so really kind of championing her career and featuring her in a couple of the series on the network, and just being interested in I guess it was it was both an underdog story and but it doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be. This should just be so. And so at that point, it really became a self-evident path for me that like featuring women doing cool shit is just more interesting than watching men do it. Like it's just so much more intuitive and dynamic. And so I don't know. It kind of informed my next step. So, from Octane TV, I went to Autoblog to create a series called The List, 1001 Car Things to Do Before You Die.
I remember actually being at Jeepers in the Rubicon with all the Jeeping people. And that was one of the first times I heard from Jessi about her and getting that spot to represent 1001 things to do in a car.
Yeah.
She was doing handstands on granite slabs in her cute little bikini. Ha, telling you.
So 30-second story about that, because you brought it up. I happened to have done the Rubicon with Edmunds, which was really great. But we got 2 Jeeps, orange Jeeps from Chrysler, and they knew we were doing the Rubicon. They let us take them for the show. Before we even hit the trail, our spare tire was stolen. And then we bump our way through and get down to like base camp, right? And we're there. And every panel on both of them had made contact at some point at that point. And then again on the way out. that's the year there was the fire and we got stuck down there for an extra day or two. And they were
Wow.
dumping water, airdropping water on our way back out of the Rubicon. But when we were on our way home, the Jeep started overheating. And it's a bunch of like Jessi and a bunch of people who know about cars. We pop the hood, we look in, we're like, I don't know. Am I missing something? I'm not seeing a coolant reservoir in the Jeep. And we sat there for maybe 20 minutes looking like, where does the coolant go in this Jeep? Well, let's finally with the idea, let's pop the other one open. And we go over and we look and we're like, no, this one has a tank. Ours clearly, someone took our coolant tank out on the trail. It was like this, like Hollywood shows up in 2 orange Jeeps, like, well, whatever, we need some parts. So I get back to the office. It was in Beverly Hills at the time. And Chrysler comes back to get their Jeeps. And I handed them the keys and I just see these 4 guys with clipboards going, what the hell happened? And so I go, are we good? And he goes, yep. And I went up to security and I said, hey, if you want to watch something interesting, focus the cameras down on those Jeeps and watch these guys check them back in. And you just see like heads shaking and writing. And then another guy would call the other guys over to check it out. It was like, we babied those things. And there was a lot of contact. And Chrysler didn't call us back for 2 years.
I was the person who used to have to check those vehicles back in on the motorcycle side. So on the factory side. So I'm like sitting here thinking I've had so many nice, returning the factory vehicles. Yeah. Like trying to get Jessi new tires on her company bike and all, it's always something. Means you had a good time.
Graham, isn't this ironic that now we've come full circle and you and I are actually meeting?
Yes.
Officially meeting. We actually officially met this year, but we were together because we all had to go out the way we came in because of that darn fire. So, and anyway, Jeepers Jamboree sidebar.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Oh,
you guys can edit, right? You have editing capabilities.
Oh, we're keeping this in. This is quality stuff.
All of it.
We're taking all of it because that's the stuff our listeners want to hear. The backstory, the behind the scenes, the whole shebang. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's wild, Dana, that you brought that up about you having to be, like the counterpart for Harley Davidson that checks in the bikes and what fun stories you must have, right?
Yeah, so we have Harley Davidson. I played a lot of different sales and marketing roles at the company over the years, and I started in Europe. I don't think I mentioned that with Harley Davidson. So my first job out of college, I moved to Europe to be an intern at Harley Davidson's corporate European headquarters in the UK in Oxford. So I'd been riding a motorcycle my whole life, just on and off road here and there, driving boats, snowmobiles, anything I could get my hands on. And then I moved to Europe and I'm like, whoa, that's where I really learned to ride a motorcycle because it's a whole different ballgame over there. And so that's what got me into the public relations side and riding. And I had a company bike to ride, and that was my mode of transportation. So that's where I learned to filter lanes. On the freeway, that's on the motorway. That's where I learned to ride, and that's where the adventure bug hit me, was traveling through Europe. And I'd ask if people wanted to go with me because I was like, I'm here, I'm 21 years old or whatever. I got to take advantage of this. I had a 6-month visa. And so I'm like, does anyone want to go with me? Because we've got an event in Saint-Tropez. Let's fly into Milan and go to the press office, to the fleet and use a bike. Does anyone want to go? And no one wanted to go. So I just,
sorry, I didn't know you at that point.
I know. I'm like,
Can we do that
again? No one wants to go with me. So I just went and I learned to ride, out of Milan where there's Ferraris and Lamborghinis, everything going by me at 115 miles an hour. And I'm on this Harley Davidson, like, all right, like, this is it, you got to make the most of it. So that's kind of where the adventure bug hit me, was just doing things, even if no one else was doing it. And, you know, finding myself in uncomfortable situations and changing hotels or changing, you know, just doing what you had to do to figure it out, to have the adventure. But that's how on the press side, I think the funniest one it's not funny to our press fleet manager, who may or may never listen to this, but
Oh, let's get him to listen to it.
right, let's get him. Sorry, Alan. But he and we had a Harley Davidson at a press fleet center based in Southern California, where that's where all the bikes for the Marvel movies are built and all the red carpets and all the things like that. And so Alan's a master technician and takes care of these motorcycles meticulously. And so when I would come out and say, all right, we're going to Babes Right Out, and we've got a crew of women or, you know, engineers that fly out from the factory, and they're like, Wilke, can you lead us out to Babes Right Out? We gotta, you know, keep a pulse on what's going on out there. And I'm like, you betcha, let's go. Yes, I said, you betcha. You can edit that out too. You could take the girl out of the Midwest.
I was going to say, you're from Wisconsin. This is what it is.
Right. Been a long time, but anyway, and so there was a banner. I just remember, well, Jessi, that's how we met, really, was I'd get Jessi motorcycles sometimes. And when she was the Grand Marshal for Sturgis, and we were going to give her a motorcycle, and I barged my way onto a conference call, and I wanted to get to know her and I wanted to know what she thought about a project I was working on for women. And so, you know, she would burn out tires, and I'd be like, all right, let's take you to the fleet center and get you a new set of tires. And so I got her a motorcycle when she, you know, if hers was down or, you know, in the shop, or she was working on it, tearing it apart or something like that. But the funny stuff, I had a group come out from Milwaukee, and I was leading everyone out to Babes Right Out. This is Babes Right Out 3, I think. I probably shouldn't even say it, but so we had this banner, and so there was a situation where none of the camping gear showed up or something like that, so we had to go to Walmart or somewhere and just buy stuff to have to be able to sleep overnight. And we had brought a Harley banner out, and one of the gals put it back on the motorcycle, and with a bungee cord or something into the fender, and it rattled the whole way back. And so all the painted parts, you can probably appreciate this, Teresa, if you put a banner onto a painted fender, like it's screwed.
Yeah.
It's because it's just rubbing the whole time. And so we get back, and I led plenty of press rides where saddlebags fall off and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, you can just buff it out.
Right. Alan's like, no, we're ordering a new, you know, we need, because they had to be perfect, these bikes. And so we bring it back, and I remember her unclipping it and looking, and I'm like, oh. It wasn't a horrific story, but it was horrific for me, clearly, because I knew that paint was screwed and that he was going to have to order that painted part from Milwaukee, and that was going to take, 12 weeks to 18 weeks and whatever. So I don't know, that's probably not that interesting, but that's the stuff that goes, those are the little things that the factory people do.
That's the stuff that Graham was making other people like you
right.
do.
The guy with the clipboard.
But you did it too.
People talk to us about like, oh my God, you get to drive all these cars, Rolls Royce and Ferrari and Lamborghinis. My favorite part is giving that thing back.
Yeah.
Honest to God, it's like super stressful. Giving it back is the best part of the whole thing. You can believe that.
Well, and now I don't have that stress anymore. I resigned. I'm like a recovering Fortune 500 girl, and so I don't have to do that anymore. But I was the one getting the calls that I lost my key fob, can't start the vehicle, right? And Graham and Jessi were the ones doing it, right, exactly. But I love you guys, and I think that's the thing. I was doing it. I was on the factory side, but I was out there losing keys and doing all that stuff too. Right there in it.
I'm curious, did you have any idea that public relations would take you in the direction that you've become,
What am I? Yeah. No, not at all, Jane. It's a good question, because what do you want to be when you grow up? It's kind of like it's the journey. And I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I went to college because I didn't know what else to do. to be honest. And I didn't know, that just, like I said, and this is the power of like those pivotal moments in children's lives and in guidance counselors in high school and shop class and these things. Like, that's how you know that it's so important of the direction it points you in or can point you in. And I didn't have shop class or these other things. I went to college because I didn't know what else to do. And then when I was getting ready to graduate, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I still don't know what I'm going to do. And I got the opportunity to do that internship in Europe, but I didn't give a shit what it was. Like, I just knew I wanted to go, and that I knew I could ride a motorcycle, and I knew that I wanted to get out of where I was, and wherever that was going to be great. And it happened to be Europe. And so I had 2 suitcases and my motorcycle helmet, and I stayed with a family over there. And that was like the most exciting thing, because it was the first time I kind of stepped out and was like, I don't know where this is going to take me, but like, I had those 2 things. I knew I could ride a motorcycle, and I knew that I could figure it out. And I don't know why I knew that, but and that was the beginning of an exciting kind of journey. And so public relations was being in the marketing department was kind of where I landed, and the Harley owners group in Europe. And Harley is a different brand. It has the same ethos, but it's a different. It has the soul of the brand is the same, and the community that it brings, but the brand itself is different in Europe, and that was fascinating to me. So to learn the Harley Davidson consumer in Germany, or different from Austria and Italy, and to ride with those different groups, but yet have kind of a central thing that brings you together, which was motorcycling and the brand. And Harley is famous for that. And so public relations, it was photo shoots and press rides, and that was. I'm fortunate that that's kind of where it started to land, because again, I knew how to ride a motorcycle. That's all I really knew how to do. So leading a press ride was not that intimidating for me, or moving bikes around, or washing bikes down. I worked at a dealership, at a motorcycle dealership in college and in high school, actually, because I didn't know what else to do, honestly. And I'm like, I know how to ride motorcycles, so I'll go and apply it at the Harley dealership.
I love this.
It's such an important combination. It's like skill plus passion, right? Like marketing and PR for what, right? It's like motorcycles. Painting right. What? Motorcycles and off-road trucks. Like that's going to put you off-road and on a motorcycle.
Right.
Like how do you take your skill and match it with your passion and create an awesome life?
And Graham, I didn't know that's what I was doing. And I think that's the part of the story, is that I now, as an elder, as someone who's been, through some decades of this shit, that like, I look back at people that were my age at that time, and like, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so, and that was okay. Yeah. And I didn't realize that I was following a passion of like, okay, again, it shows the impact that you can have on a child or a young person, that like my mom and dad let me ride a motorcycle. They let me, I had my boating license, my snowmobile license, and my ATV license, all the licenses. And scuba diving, all when I was 12 years old. I got like 6 different licenses.
Wow.
And it was just like, okay, well, I thought that's what every kid did. But anyway, I was confident in those areas. I could drive a boat. I could, ride a motorcycle. And so when I'm in those environments, I was confident. So leading a press ride, it's like, hey, Dana, can you pull up this? There was a time when I was leading a ride or I wasn't leading it. I was just the intern that was supposed to be kind of doing whatever everyone else needed me to do. And it turned out I needed to ride the motorcycle that one of the guys, that was too big for one of the guys that was on the ride. And we had a bunch of bikes shipped up to Scotland. And again, I was the intern and the chick from the United States. So, and one of the guys showed up and he's like, I'm not riding that. And I had picked the model I wanted to ride that I was going to help. And he's like, I want to ride that one. And I watched the whole thing happening. And he picked the bike that had my name taped on it, but and I'm like, okay. And so the head guy comes over and he's like, all right, Dana, we're going to need you to, this guy wants it. He was a higher up individual. And so he needs to ride this motorcycle. Can you ride that, ultra limited, which is the largest bike Harley Davidson makes? These huge bikes. You think of Santa Claus on a Harley, that's the bike.
No, tell Napoleon to get on the back of my
right.
bike.
And I'm like,
Napoleon.
I've never ridden one of those, but I'll give it a shot. And so I jumped on this huge ass bike and I'm like, fuck it, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
And so I did it. So those are the moments. And so PR was kind of the vehicle, but as I reflect on it, it was because of riding.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. I love that you guys parallel also with like the dealership part of it, like that you guys both had something like that too. And I mean, I worked at, parents, auto body shop too. So it's like you said, it's just getting into that. Like, I don't know, this seems cool. Like, I guess I'm going to do this because I'm into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then, for you, Graham, I mean, obviously like getting into like this storytelling and stuff, like what was your first memory of actually like becoming a creative? Like what was that moment when you kind of knew like, okay, this is a direction and passion that I need to follow? I mean, you said you like to be outdoors and you love this motorsports, but what was that like pivotal moment for you?
I think it's shaping my environment. A lot of that being outside again is like, you have the ability to shape your environment, whether it's a tree fort or building trails or things like that, or like finding a perspective that's intriguing. If you have matchbox cars, like what's the angle that you can set them up so that you've got like a scene happening and jumps, and you have this kind of meta world that you're kind of setting up to create an outcome, right? And so started in that kind of way. And my parents had one of the early video cameras that was like tethered to a VCR. So it was like a backpack VCR with the tape in the back and then the camera on the cable. And like, it was hard. And so I was like, all right, this is hard. You carry heavy stuff and you like hoof it out there and you make something, right? And so, that's kind of, my friend Greg and I used to go out and make videos and movies in the backyard. And then, again, it's college, but yeah, it was the idea of going off to a foreign place or some sort of unique environment and bringing the story back for people that weren't there. And so that really became my model. I went to Africa when I was a teenager a few times, and it was like, I just wanted my friends and people to know where I was living in these remote villages, that like, it's just like another world that you can't relate to, with no electricity,
so cool.
No running water, but it's beautiful. The families all knew, the villages all knew the same songs. They knew 3 languages. They were so wonderful to each other. There was an abundance. And I wanted to bring that back for my community and my friends, and so it became, okay, go do something rad in a far off place and bring it home so people can also have a window into that world,
That is so cool. And with your parent, like, who did you go, like you said, as a teenager, you went to Africa?
Yeah, I was 15. It was a group in town that was started by a doctor who had met a bishop in one of the villages. And he just said, the doctor, basically the premise of how it started was, there's all these grants out there that they would never have access to with no electricity, obviously, and no access. Mm-hmm. So it was things like Heifer Project International, healthy cattle, new farming practices where, each had their own plot kind of thing. Fresh water was a big one, right? Drilling wells for fresh water eliminated so many other health issues, things like that. So really, it was a self-help group of giving people access to helping themselves, using communication and connection to help these villages help themselves.
That's so interesting. That is so cool to be able to have an opportunity, both of you guys, like actually to go and kind of travel the world. And it's funny because I've done that as well. I was going to like Holland and stuff too, and even my son too. And I think it's really important to get out and to really experience other cultures and things like that. So
I agree, Teresa. That's really, I was going to say that it was interesting for me to start my career globally with a global mindset.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times for, just one way or another, you end up reaching that. But for me, it was the first thing that I did went global. And so I had to adapt to different cultures, to different ways people think and talk, and where English was their fourth language or not their language. And so I had to learn how to communicate with people in the business world, and in life, that were not like me and that didn't think like me. And so that adaptability, I didn't realize, was training me to be a different type of business person and a different human, really. Because that framed my mindset. Those 2 years right after college was what, in those formative years, that formed my mindset for business and life and and these different cultures. So then I came back to the US and I thought everybody operated like that.
It's interesting, that worldview. It's like, I have a saying, it's come up a lot more since we started the foundation, but it's about get above the fray, right? Whatever fray you're in, get above it. Leave your town, go see other towns. If that's it, fine. Go see another state. If that's it, fine. Go to another country. Right. Work for somebody, become the manager, own the business, right? Like whatever fray you're at, be called to get above that one into the next one.
Yeah, I think that's where my affinity for radical inclusion, it kind of comes into play, where it's about including, it's learning about people and learning where they come from. I took one of those strength finder things in the business world, and my top strength is empathy. So it's like I feel what others are feeling. And so like including people and having that be the place that you come from versus all kinds of different places. But it helped me to, be a more open-minded individual in the business world and in life, and seek adventure, because I just wanted to learn.
But even that you just said that, Dana, like if you don't work in an environment that would create the circumstances for you to even take those tests, that's a thing. Like for me, that came through work. It was like, I'm a helpful inspirer. To bolster those qualities through testing that someone has kind of taken the leap for you to do yourself. It's like, how do we help other people, young people in particular, identify those things that are their superpowers so they can lean further into them?
I couldn't agree more, because the fact that we did that, I mean, it gave me language to say what I just said. If I wouldn't have been able to say that and be proud of it. And so how do
boasting.
Right. And how do we take that type of skill? And that's part of what I do in my consulting and business work, is with dealerships or different people that want to grow their business, make more money. It's like it comes with your people. Your people come first. And so how do you take care of your people? And it's helping them be the best people they can be. And it's through those kind of tests like that, like whatever, a Myers-Briggs or...
Well, it's this community. Yeah. It's exactly what you guys are building. It's what you want to encourage them to have, because when they have that community, inclusion,
you feel like you can do it.
Like, they're part of it. 100%. And even Graham, I think you were getting that from like these little villages, like you said, you can go to them and you feel like you're part of them too. You're not just, oh, you're an outsider. Like, we don't want to talk to you. It's completely different. Like cultures over there are completely different and very welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that's what makes what we're doing with the Jessi Combs Foundation. So, I mean, like my heart is so in it because of that community building. Like that's my passion, is building community and bringing people together that can then like support each other, and being advocates and letting those young girls, those women, those little trailblazers, like they really are the next generation. And how can they not feel alone in what they're doing in their shops, in their, whatever they're doing? There's other people out there alone in their shops. How do we bring them together so that they know they're not alone? And just knowing that gives you courage, right?
Yeah.
Helps courage.
You were talking a little bit about the consulting and your entrepreneurship and how you've evolved, not past, but beyond the public relations, not excluding it, but including it, and now into leadership and business growth. And how does that feel different for you, being at the helm, spearheading that?
Yeah, I didn't set out to do it. It's the next chapter in my journey. And that after leaving, like I said before, kind of recovering Fortune 500, but I say that with love and respect because I learned so much. I didn't even realize how much I learned and how much the company, like everything that I took away from my time in the corporate world, I can now apply to helping others that may not have that don't have that experience. And that, it's not about becoming more corporate. It's about using the in some cases, it's taking the things that I didn't get or the things that I wished that I'd gotten to be developed from managers or directors or VPs or CEOs or whoever. But like you can put me in a room with any of those folks and I have experience in that way of, you always learn something from people. You either learn what you want to be like or what you don't want to be like in some cases. And so, but it's all good and positive. And I have a lot to offer to people that to businesses and companies that want to grow. I see the things that cause people to stumble or businesses to stumble. And I'm like, oh, I can help you take that barrier away because you may not realize it, but it's your people or it's your culture. And that hits your bottom line. So I'm bottom line oriented, but it starts with the people.
Yep.
I love it. Because you're right on the money. It's about that culture and exposing these large scale companies. And you have the empathy aspect of it that, Teresa, you and I were talking about that the other day about how to be successful is adding courtesy, kindness, concern for those that are around you. And you're a living example of what women have contributed really within the Fortune 500.
Right. And it hasn't always had a name. Right. It hasn't always had a name or a place to fit.
Yeah.
And companies, I think, are still finding that. And that's why there's now diversity, and inclusion initiatives. And those are all really important. But it doesn't always have a place to live because sometimes it doesn't live in HR and sometimes it doesn't live in the day-to-day work. And so we're on this, journey of finding out where that stuff fits because it is important to the bottom line. And some people have labeled it as fluffy or whatever over the years, but guess what? It turns out that, we have, when you think about retention problems with employees and things like that, well, how can we, what's causing that? Oh, we're treating our people. How are we treating our people? You just ask those questions, peel back the layers of the onion, and it comes back to the people and how you treat them in business, in friendships, in all of it, right? One of the many things that I loved about Jessi was, how she treated people in her hand-to-hand combat, I call it, like every day in the hallways of SEMA, one little girl or an entire, audience of people that she had. It was, Jane, you said you were going to talk about this at the end, but one of my favorite things, what does it mean to be a badass? And it means to be nice, to be kind, right? It's badass to be nice. And I feel like that shouldn't, and it's about rebelling for something in some cases versus rebelling against it.
It's the confidence to be kind.
Yeah. And that takes confidence. And we're in a world that the pendulum is swings so many different ways. And like, it feels like we're at this kind of moment where the pendulum has swung so far one way. So now being nice is like, oh, it's badass to be nice. And that's being courageous, which sounds strange.
No, I think that we've gotten so used to, and again, Teresa and I were talking about this, the idea of it's strange when somebody's nice to you, right?
Right.
When you don't know the person, or people kind of look at you like, why are you smiling at me? Why did you say hello? Who knew that it had to take courage to say hi?
Yeah.
Here.
And it doesn't matter what gender you are.
Yeah.
And that's why, in the consulting work that I do, and I didn't resign from Harley to go and be a consultant. I resigned and I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I've kind of taken, my compass has led me to people that want to grow their businesses in a different way.
Yeah.
And then building this foundation in Jessi's honor has been my North Star.
Yeah. I love that. So like for you, Graham, as well, like now, in filmmaking and stuff, like what, as far as like your first project, like what was that like? And then now, like, what's your favorite project been like over your film career, and where have you like grown? Like what can you see that's so different?
I mean, I think from the beginning, like in college, I one of my trips to Africa is when I filmed my first documentary. And then in college, when I was getting out of college, I shot a feature that was like a period piece set in the 60s. That like, I broke all the rules of things that college students should be doing, like travel, all the kind of like challenging, difficult things. And I had to raise money. So I learned fundraising. I learned pitching. I learned inspiring people to want something to be created in the world, right? I had to do that. I didn't like come from the money that I could just do all this stuff. It was like the necessity and the need helped me develop all the other areas that I would need in my life, like fundraising and inspiring and pitching and getting support. And so with that, you're building trust, you're building urgency of like, okay, this money was given, now we need to deliver the goods. So like, shit, there is no not doing this, right?
Yep.
You get that model of like, okay, go out on the skinny branches and take on more than you think you can, because that's how you're going to grow. And so I always, when I go into a job, I look at it, how do I get paid to learn? And what skinny branches can I go out on this project? And so to bring it to more recent times, when I got hired by Autoblog to produce and direct the list, they're like, we want a car show for car guys. And it really just struck me, again, I had that experience with Octane TV with the female drifter and the whole thing. And I just said, can it be an action adventure series? And can the host be female? Can the expert be a woman? And then her co-host is just a dude, and every man that's like fun and funny, someone you want to hang out with, right? And the team was in Detroit. I was in LA. And so I kind of said all that in a little bit of a rant. Like, I think the host is a woman. I think it's an action adventure series. And then it was quiet. And I was like, hello? And it's like, we're just processing this. We're processing, right? And so I said, all right, let me have the auditions and we'll see where we land, right? Let's just do the auditions. And Jessi's name, I didn't know who she was, and her name came up in the conversations and through research. And her agent at the time happened to be the talent lead at Octane TV, one of the parent company of Octane TV. So I knew her, and I was like, this whole coincidence unfolded where I knew them. And so I called her. I said, I would love Jessi to audition for this show that I've got. She's like, yeah, absolutely. It was one of the rare times Jessi had an agent. She really struggled with that. Someone that understood her and understood the automotive space and like the SEMA of it all, plus the host and TV of it all. Those are two totally different worlds. And it's very rare that someone understands both simultaneously. So in walks Jessi to the audition, and she's got that like bounce in her step. She's like,
hi guys.
And I was just like, that is not, I was dealing with, because I had opened it up to women, it was a lot of like nerves, and like, I was in the garage once with my dad, and it was like, okay, like, I'm glad you're here, but that's not going to cut it this time.
I can't imagine when
But I was
Jessi
like,
walked in. I wish I could.
I was rooting for them because really all you want is authenticity, right? It's not about what you have or don't have. It's like, you've got to have authenticity of like, no, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just love it, right? Whatever that authenticity is. Jessi walked in and it was like those blue eyes, and she just owned the room, walked in, gracious, shook everyone's hand, is smiling. And I was like, well, there she is. Like that.
Love it.
And it was like, will she have us? Right. So that was my first intro into, I'm having these auditions and I want to choose Jessi. And what I would learn later in life, shortly after, is that Jessi chooses you.
Oh my gosh, I got the chills right now because that's all of us.
Jessi chooses
I
you.
know.
So I was like, and I didn't quite know that the way I know it now, but like, I was like, I really hope she chooses us, because I knew she was making different money elsewhere. And that like, all I can do is create the most awesome experience that she wants to be a part of. And so now the game was, how do we find her partner, her co-host? So now we need someone that can have chemistry with her and that she gets along with, isn't creeped out by, and that they get along. And this person also has to be willing to like allow her to be her full self and in charge of this ship, right? And she became the queen of this show. And Patrick McIntyre, who's like an incredible dear friend of mine now, was her sidekick. And we set out to make this show. And really, that's where I got the power of culture on a team, and what is possible when you all have each other's backs and you advocate for each other. You create the circumstances for safety, for fulfillment, for health, for wellness, for what's in your personal life that might be in the way of you being fucking awesome today. Let's talk about that first. Let's get it out of the way. And then like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What country, what car? Now we get into the how of it all, right? And so that's where things really got awesome, because we failed when we did episodes like change the oil in your car, photograph your car. Like there are terrible list episodes out there. And admittedly, Jessi was pretty performative at the early part of the series of hosty from her previous experiences, where she was hosty. Jessi's at her best when she's like, my favorite line and became my favorite line in directing too, is when someone goes, here's the deal. When someone says, here's the deal, it's gold. You know that you've struck something that's like, all pretense is down.
Right.
No, now something's at stake. Here's the deal, right? She got to that point, and that was such a huge part of our relationship, was helping her understand the power of vulnerability and the power of people don't want to watch you do what you already know how to do. They want to watch you overcome your own personal stakes to achieve greatness. So what's at stake? I don't care what it is. Is it, the game is don't touch the center line as you're going around the corner at 100. Great. Like whatever makes you pucker, do that, because that's when you're interesting.
Love it. Yeah.
And so we would come up with those games, and it's interesting. So Jessi went off the end of a runway at 200 miles an hour in a Ferrari. She spun out an F1 car. She spun out more cars on this series. The most scared I saw her was in a 4 horsepower car, between 1 and 4 horsepower car in France, while Patrick was driving down an alleyway and the mirrors were about to scrape both sides of the alley. And she's like, oh, you see it in the movie. It's a quick shot where she's like terrified that the car is going to get stuck in this alley. So things that scare most people don't scare Jessi. And so it all just came around to who we got to be for each other, how we got to learn and grow as part of our work, and how do we get to champion and support and elevate each other into like just being the best versions of ourselves and the best friends for each other.
It's a perfect note to finish on, to take a break, stretch our legs, use facilities, blow our nose.